We continue our look at Universal Orlando through the eyes of Walt Disney World fans as we bring you part 3 of our UUO podcast documentary. You are listening to episode 406 of the unofficial Universal Orlando podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Lee, I'm here again. Thanks for joining us. Again, I'm going to encourage everyone, if you have not listened to episodes 404 and 405, I strongly encourage that you go and do it because this episode might not make an awful lot of sense without them. I'm sure you all have at this point. Please go and listen to those first 2 episodes before you listen to this one because, as I said, this is part 3 of my podcast documentary. And before we get into it, I would once again like to thank all of my guests for joining me and introduce them to you one by one. There is Maria Riboli, the former host of the Unleash the Magic podcast. Mike Collins, one of the hosts of the CoasterRadio.com podcast. Nikki Montoya, one half of the Theme Park Duo podcast. Pete Werner, one of the hosts of the Diz Unplugged podcast. Ricky Niblett, co-host of the Be Our Guest podcast. And finally, Mr. Tom Corliss, host of the WDWNT podcast. So now we've got that out of the way, let's get on with it. So one of the things that really sets the two resorts apart is its attitude towards families. Universal Orlando has, for the most part, definitely set itself up as a resort geared much more towards families with older kids, teens and adults, and not really taking under 5s into consideration, with most of their attractions having a height requirement. Whereas Walt Disney World's goal has always been to have parks that, again, for the most part, have attractions that the whole family can experience together. You know, it was Walt Disney's plan from the very start to build Disneyland as a park where grandma and toddler could ride everything together and all in between. A park that people could experience the entire family together. So I asked next, do you think not catering the entire Universal Orlando resort to the entire family hurts Universal in their aim to grab more of the market share of Orlando tourism from Walt Disney World?
Being somebody who doesn't have kids, I really appreciate that Universal does that. I have to be honest. So, that's my honest answer right there. I think... Yeah, I think both, but yes, definitely. I mean, Disney has more things for the whole family. Yeah, like for every age, every park has something that can really include every single child there. But it's also true that I think no matter what, every child, on Earth has grown up watching at least one Disney movie. I shouldn't say every child on Earth, but you know what I'm trying to say. Like the majority of the children out there, we were blessed enough to be able to grow up watching Disney cartoons and stuff like that. And so there's more stuff to do for them there, from even just meeting a character that they will recognize right away. Universal is different. Again, it's probably more of a quote unquote an adult park in a way, but I think it has plenty of spots for kids. I think, I don't think that it's only just a few spots. For toddlers, sure, absolutely. Then again, do you want to bring all your toddlers to a theme park? I don't know why you want to do that. just stop doing that. It's just, I have so much respect for family who do that because I know it must be in so much work. And it's great that they're doing that. And of course, that they're giving that memory to their kids. But you know what I mean? I think you can still find it. Yeah, I think you can still find it. I also think you have 2 different kind of families that they go, to the parks. Like, the average Disney families with the little girls or little boys that are really into the Disney movies. Of course they're gonna love that. They're gonna the girls are gonna dress up as little princesses and they're gonna love the castle and it's really sweet to see that. It puts a smile on my face to see those kids living that dream. Now, if I think about the kind of kid that I was when I was growing up, I was never a princess kind of girl. I was, the only princess was probably Leia from Star Wars for me, and everything else. Like I grew up, I had a Spider-Man PJ that I loved, and they couldn't get me out of it. So I would probably be the kid that I was like, I would be like, yeah, let's go to Universal. I'm enjoying this more. There's Spider-Man and Captain America, and that would be my kind of jam as a little kid. So I don't think Universal is just for adults. It's probably targeting more adults or teenagers or older kids, but I think there are plenty of very magical things for toddlers there, from obviously Dr. Seuss Land. I think it's adorable. I enjoy it myself. I have zero problems just, hanging out there because I love the colors. I take tons of pictures there all the time because I think it's really pretty. So I think there's depending on what you truly are into, then you can find something at both parks and both resorts for the whole family. Sure, if you want the little kids ride or whatever it is, maybe you won't be able to find it. Sure, they have more roller coasters or more rides that are for adults. But also, how young is the kid? I mean, how much can the kid really do? How much can the kid truly absorb? You know what I mean? If it's a toddler, I mean, let's be honest. How much is it going to remember of it? You're going to get great pictures of your kid there, but, is it going to remember that he was either at Disney or at Universal when he was, 2? No, he's not, So I think there's still plenty of things. And I actually think it would be less stressful for parents to bring kids there because they don't have to run all over the parks looking for the next princess or the next fast pass or the next ride that the kids can do. Depending on the age, I think they can find plenty of things.
I have an 18-month-old daughter, and when I was at Universal back in October of 2019, we went without her. So it was interesting, just kind of an adult's weekend away. And I remember thinking like, oh, if we brought her back here, what is there for her to do? And I was kind of walking through the parks and looking, and there really wasn't a lot. And so it made me think, comparing it to Disney. Disney is really built for, people my daughter's age and a little bit older. And so I think that does hurt Universal in terms of bringing the family crowd, especially the young families coming in. I think when those kids become teenagers, maybe even like 10, 11, 12, like even, old enough to enjoy roller coasters, I think that's when Universal gets them. That's when those families will come. But I really think it's hard for anybody with toddlers or kids who are, 7, 8, 9, they're probably going to head to Disney. And that probably does hurt Universal with that audience. But I think that Universal is going for a certain thing, like kind of being a little bit anti-Disney. And, something where there are a lot of thrills and there's a lot of action. You even see it in the theming, and, it's just a different look at Universal. So I think that's what they're going for. More of an action. Like it just feels like there's a lot more action happening. And, there's the color schemes and the signage. Everything's just kind of different at Universal. And I think that's what they're going for. I think that's why you don't see gigantic kiddie lands. I mean, there are a few things there for the little kids to do, but primarily, I think they like what they're doing right now. They like the crowds that they're gathering. But I'd be curious to see if in Epic Universe or any of these other things, if there are going to be like solid kid lands that would show a real departure from what they've done in the past.
I think it definitely does, because it just lowers their market audience, because if we're going to plan a trip with our daughter, we're going to go to Walt Disney World because she's young and there's more stuff we can do with her there. And it's just more of like a all-inclusive type thing for her also. But if we were planning a trip, like leaving her with the grandparents and going off on her own, we would definitely probably lean towards Universal Orlando ourselves. So I think it just lowers the amount of people who are going to choose that park over Walt Disney World. And it's the same problem out here. Like we go to Universal Studios Hollywood with Erin, and there's nothing she can do. It's like I wouldn't even bother taking her at this age. Like when she was an infant and she was just in the stroller all day, it's, we can parent swap and it's fine. But, there's nothing to entertain her at the age she currently is at. So it's not a park we would choose right now. So I think that's the exact same thing that's happening in Florida. They have Kung Fu Panda, and she watched that, but that's literally it, because Minions has a height restriction. Even the splash pad outdoor water play area has a height restriction. So there's literally nothing she can do.
Universal is never going to grab, I don't care what they do, they are never going to grab that market away from Disney. that that younger market. Teens and adults, absolutely. But when you talk about that, 5 to 11, 5, 10, 11-year-olds range, you got to think of the sheer amount of intellectual property that Disney owns targeted to that very age group. Even when Universal eventually opens Nintendo Land at the new theme park, you'll have kids in there, but let's be honest, it's going to be the 30-somethings that grew up with the NES and the SNES that are going to be in there, reliving their childhoods. And I think Universal knows that. Universal knows that it's almost not even worth them putting too much money into that, because they simply can't compete with where Disney is. So I think they've done a good job of staying in their lane. And I always felt, and I'd said this for a while, that the new park should be all Nintendo. Because if you think about who the parents are now, they all grew up with that. And that's, I thought a full Nintendo theme park would have been brilliant, would have been absolutely brilliant. I'm happy they're doing a land, but I would have liked more. But that's who they're aiming for with Nintendo. They're not aiming for 10-year-olds. They're aiming for their fathers and their mothers who played Super Nintendo, who played Mario Brothers, played Zelda. Those are really rich IPs. And that's also always been one of Universal's weaknesses, in my opinion. They don't own a lot of the intellectual property that goes into their parks. Disney does. The only piece of intellectual property Disney didn't own was Avatar, and then they bought 20th Century Fox, so now they do. But Disney owns all that IP. Universal is, every attraction you walk on at Universal is the result of massive amounts of negotiation with different people, okay, with different companies, with different studios. There are horror stories of what they've had to go through with Warner Brothers and Wizarding World and Diagon Alley. I remember we did a party at, we've done a couple of parties over at, we did one at Wizarding World, one at Diagon Alley, and the credentials that we created had to be approved by Universal, and we get their notes back to make changes. And then it had to be approved by Warner Brothers. And there were times that what Warner Brothers was telling us we had to do, and what Universal was telling us we had to do, were in complete odds with each other. And we're like, okay, guys, I don't know who's in charge here, so you guys fight it out amongst yourselves. But that's the case. That's the case. They've had to rely on a lot of intellectual property they don't own. So some of the attractions you've talked about that have been removed were removed because their rights to the IP expired. So that's always been a challenge for Universal. But they seem to make it work. Remember what Universal was supposed to be about, why that park opened. Remember its genesis, right? So there was actually a theme park built on the studio lot of Universal Studios Hollywood. And when you do a backstage tour there, you're actually doing a backstage tour on the actual Universal Studios lot. So it was about movies, right? It was ride the movies. That was the tagline for years. Ride the movies. Then to compete with Disney, they had to expand out beyond that. And that's what they were doing with Islands of Adventure, right? So they got the rights to some Marvel characters for Superhero Island, some comic book characters. The big get for them was the estate of Dr. Seuss, allowing that. There were horror stories about what they had to go through to get his widow to sign off on that. So Universal itself as a company has never been in the family entertainment business. Disney, from its very beginning, was nothing but that. So, it's like, in that regard, when we're talking about that market, that that family market. It's like comparing Coke to store brand cola. Coke has the history. Coke has the market, right? They built it from the very beginning. Sam's Club Cola does not. It does not have that. And I'm not saying that, Universal is the equivalent of a generic soda, because it's not at all. I wish they weren't doing Pepsi, but okay. But, all of Disney's DNA is built around that. And you just, even Legoland tries to compete with that. And at best, Legoland's been open for how long now? And it does okay. But at best, it's a afterthought, right? I mean, I do this for a living. The number of times I hear the word Legoland, I could count on both hands in the course of a year. So it's just they're not a player. So I think Universal is smart in aiming for that teen adult audience. And I think it works well for them. But again, also, Disney theme parks have been owned by the same company since the beginning. It's not the case with Universal. Universal has changed hands so many times that there hasn't been the consistency of ownership and vision that has guided Disney to guide Universal. Now, assuming Comcast stays in for the long haul, let's talk 10 years from now, when Comcast has 20 years under their belts or more. And, 10 years from now, assuming Comcast still owns them, they haven't had that consistency of leadership. And that has hurt them more than anything. More than anything else, that has hurt them. And you don't have a corporate parent looking at it as a piggy bank. You have a corporate parent that looks at it as an asset to be nurtured and invested in. Of course, to make money, but not only from that standpoint. They have a larger vision of what they want it to be, and they invest that money to do it. And as a result of that, you see, since it really is, the Comcast age is the golden age for these theme parks. It is the golden age. And it doesn't hurt that the head of Comcast and the head of Disney hate each other's guts. And it's a constant blood feud. Well, now that Iger stepped down, I think it doesn't matter, as long as I think that's always going to be a blood feud there. And it's not pretty. It's not a pretty feud.
In a nutshell, yes. I absolutely feel that not having as many family-friendly attractions that the whole family can do, unfortunately, I think it does hurt Universal. I don't know if that's necessarily their market, though. I don't know if they're even reaching out for that. I mean, look at the marketing that they have done in the past. That commercial that they had where it was basically saying, okay, once you're done with Disney, you come to Universal. That was basically their marketing campaign for a while. So I don't know if that's really what they're looking for. I think that they have some attractions that are okay for little ones, but for the most part, no, I don't feel like they cater towards that at all. And I do think it hurts them. I think because they're not grabbing people necessarily when they have little ones, I think that that's probably where some of that negativity towards Universal comes from. People don't necessarily want to try it because they're like, well, there's nothing for my little one to do. So, if they have a family of, say a 13-year-old, a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old or whatever, they don't want to take their 3-year-old to Universal because, well, there's not a lot for that 3-year-old to do. So they do have to do something like a child swap or something like that, to be able to really experience everything. And then they're not experiencing everything as a family at that point. So yes, I do think it hurts Universal that they don't have more catered toward the younger set. But again, I don't necessarily think that that's what they're looking for. I think that they're happy in what they've got, because if they weren't, they would absolutely add attractions that were catered more toward little ones. You look at what they're building right now, or not building, and it's all still thrill related for the most part. It's not geared toward little ones. So I think that they're happy with where they are. I don't think that they want to necessarily cater towards little families. I do think it's a negative knock on them, though. Like I said, I think that they're not getting those ones with little ones to want to come to their park and then fall in love with it. Like that's because that's how Disney has really made people fall in love with their parks. To be perfectly honest, get them when they're young and have them have that nostalgia. And by not doing that at Universal, I went as a young kid. If you want to count 12 as young. So I have that a little bit of nostalgia factor toward Universal just in that regard, but it's not nearly as strong as my nostalgia was for Disney, because I went to Disney when I was 2, 4, 8, like I've had that build up as a kid. And so that's why I have such strong nostalgia for Disney, is because I did do the parks at a young age and I didn't necessarily do Universal at that young of an age. So yeah, I think it hinders them a lot, actually.
I think it does, but I think Comcast knows that it does. And that's why in more recent years, I think they've done a lot more family stuff. I think knocking down Dragon Challenge and building definitely a roller coaster more people can ride is a step in that direction. I think most of the stuff they've done since Comcast came in has been more directed at family. I think especially if you look at Universal Hollywood, I think the effects are much more apparent because I feel like all that Hollywood has done the last couple of years is family stuff. They getting rid of Terminator and putting in Despicable Me, but then also building that Secret Life of Pets ride and putting in Harry Potter and all those. There's, I think, been a real focus on making the park have something for everybody. And the Universal Orlando is certainly the same. I just think it's more spread out, so it's hard to, it's 2 parks, it's spread out over, it's easier. It's harder to tell than in Hollywood, where it's one small park and if you hadn't been in 5 years, you come back, you're like, oh yeah, that's definitely the change in direction they're making. But that's definitely what Universal, if you just look at their advertising, their advertising is just families. And every commercial I've seen is families. It's not like it was where it's, these older teens almost exclusively, riding Spider-Man and Hulk. And you have to have something for everybody. Like, they certainly have those things for older people, but I think they're just trying to mix it up now. They're trying to make sure they have a diverse lineup that is good for families. It's good for that older crowd that they already catered to. It's silly when you're a theme park that draws that many people to not try to cater to certain audiences. Disney, I think, started more as a family, we're going to do family only stuff. And then over time, I think even Walt was talked into, we got to do a roller coaster, and he was talked into Matterhorn. He's like, well, if we're going to do a coaster, it's going to be one that most people can ride. It's going to be sort of a family coaster. And then that's what Disney's always done. Like, they have thrill ride, but there's certainly some that aren't necessarily friendly for the whole family. There's some that not everyone in the family is going to ride Tower of Terror or Rock and Roller Coaster or Everest. So you got to have something for everyone. And I think Comcast has done a good job of knowing, like, hey, executives probably brought their family. Are like, hey, you guys don't have a lot of stuff for my son to do. Like, we should work on that. And I think they've been cognizant of adding more stuff for families. I think the lineup for Epic Universe, I think a lot more of that seems family friendly than if you look at the Islands of Adventure 1999 opening attraction lineup. I think that was the complaint in Hollywood too, and I think that's why they axed Terminator and put into like they've added essentially 3 rides in 3-4 years. Because they have Despicable Me, but they also have like the spinner. They built like a kid's spinner. And then now Secret Life, which is just a dark ride. So they're definitely going in that direction. And I think the new park too. I think the Super Mario stuff is going to be something the whole family could go on. You have a whole land for How to Train Your Dragon, which is obviously going to be family friendly. Yeah, I think they're getting better at having a mix of stuff. But under 5 years old, that's rough because it's mostly just playgrounds at that point. I think it's like playgrounds, and Cat in the Hat has a height requirement, right? And even though it's a basically a Fantasyland dark ride, not everyone could go on Cat in the Hat, at least when it opened, when the spinning was more intense, I remember. So, yeah. Despicable Me doesn't because of the stationary seats, right? That's the only reason. So not even in full but they do that's like that and Shrek, basically. But that's the thing. I mean, like Disney spent how many years developing theme park attractions, and when Universal came to Orlando, even in Hollywood, they weren't a theme park. It was mostly the tour. And that was their first foray into rides. And so they hired a lot of these companies without really thinking like, oh, we're going to do like this ET ride that's like Peter Pan. We really should make it so anyone can ride it. Instead, they designed this, well, it's a fun ride system. It's certainly not in a seat that's accommodating of everyone. So even when they did build things that were intended for families, they weren't quite. You can go see Barney and Trek, and that's your day. Barney show's pretty good. I don't dislike the Barney show. It's worth seeing once. There are some weird things that happen in it it was for its time, it is a well-staged theme park kids show. I think it's worth a view. Even if you don't have kids, you should go see it once just to say you saw it. Well, I mean, there's been 48 plans for that plot, right? I mean, we're going to build Star Trek. Oh, it's going to be Pokemon. Oh, it's Nintendo. Oh, and then every time at the last moment, it's like, nope, Fievel lives another day.
Have you taken a stroll down Diagon Alley and visited Gringotts Bank? Taken a ride through New York with Jimmy Fallon, visited the Truffler Trees and Zeus Landing, or hung out with a real-life Transformer? No? Then what are you waiting for? At Universal Orlando Resort, there truly is an option for everyone. Or if you're leaning a little more towards pixie dust rather than wands and potions, Disney destinations around the globe await your arrival. No matter the adventure, our sponsors have you covered. Be sure to let the experts at Mouse Muggle Travel Company take care of all your travel needs. Earning the distinction of being an earmarked agency specializing in Disney destinations, as well as becoming one of the first to be named a U Preferred agency with Universal Parks and Resorts Vacations. Mouse Muggle Travel Company will ensure you receive top-rate customized service. Just visit mousemuggle.com to fill out a non-obligation quote request, or send your request to info@mouseandmuggle.com. Their team can take care of you no matter where in the world you go. With a flick of their wand and a little bit of pixie dust, the process will be so seamless, some might even say it's simply magical.
Now, in 9 years of doing this podcast, we've heard many stories of visitors to Orlando thinking that Universal Orlando is part of Walt Disney World, and it makes us shake our heads and facepalm quite often, I'm sure. We've even heard stories of guests trying to use their Disney tickets to get into Universal parks, or even asking Disney cast members, where's the Harry Potter theme park? Again, facepalm moments, everyone. So anyway, being that we know that many visitors to Orlando primarily go to visit Walt Disney World and tack on a couple of days at Universal Orlando, and the fact that the approach to both parks can be very different, I asked my guests next, do you think that the differing approach, setup and experience of both resorts, and the fact that Disney World guests will be used to having Magic Bands and FastPass Plus, will turn visitors off to Universal Orlando when they visit? Or do you think it'll be a welcome break from the uber-organised Disney part of their trip?
I personally see it as a nice break. And it's not even a break, but like just a different experience. Like you get something different. And that's what I want if I go to a different park. I don't want to see something that it's trying to be Disney. Same way I don't want to see something that is trying to be Universal. I want to see Universal and I want to see Disney. So I appreciate the two, what both parks have to offer. It's funny, I don't know how many times I was in a Disney park and I've seen and I've heard somebody ask a cast member, where is the Harry Potter area? And you see the cast member is like, yeah, it's not here. so it's a little bit more further down the road. And again, it's cute. Again, people that, they're organizing their own trip and it can be confusing. I understand that. But you get two very different worlds and two different kind of magic in a way. Disney is a very specific, obviously it's the Disney world in what I mean, like the actual world of the cartoons and their stories and that kind of magic. That is a very different kind of magic from Universal. Universal, you have the movies, and that's, again, personally, it's something that I love because it's what I do in life, and so I'm attracted to that. And then once again, to me, they scored the jackpot with Harry Potter, because it's, first of all, they did it beautifully. That land, it's stunning. It's still, it holds up very well. It's so well done. I know a lot of people were like, well, they recreated, they were very faithful to the books and the movies, and so it's very small. All the shops are small inside. It's hard to get around. And yes, it's true, but I actually appreciate that. I appreciate that it didn't turn into, that all of a sudden you walk into a store and it's a giant merchandise store, rows of, wands and whatever it is. I love that you get the feeling of actually being there. Again, I would never go at Christmas time, because you read me in the news, but, but again, I also have the luxury to be able to go on a September morning and on a Monday at 10 a.m. that it's literally, there's nobody there. You just walk around like it's your own park. So that's something that I appreciate that very much. So I think they're both parks are doing a great job at the end of it. Both parks are giving us something very different, and I hope they're going to continue to do that. The Nintendo park for Universal, I'm pretty sure it's going to be something that won't appeal to everybody, because it can be, a little different. But on the other side, I think it's actually going to attract a lot of new audience. We're looking at, we live right now in an age where, all the kids are glued to video games, and the parents grew up with those kinds of video games, with Super Mario and everything. So I think we're going to see a new audience coming in because of that park. And then, of course, probably experiencing also Universal and Islands of Adventure. Again, I appreciate that try to be better than the other park, because we benefit from it. When Universal did Harry Potter, then we had Pandora for Disney. And, Pandora, for example, it's at Animal Kingdom. I think visually it's really beautiful. I was never really into the movie, so I didn't care for it. It wasn't one of those lands that I was like, I have to go see Pandora. No, I mean, when I got there, I was like, okay, I'm going to go see it. And it was really nice. And again, I think it's beautiful, and it's beautiful. All the lights, I ran through it with a Run Disney race that I thought it was really beautiful. It took me forever to get on Flight of Passage, so that I don't appreciate. But again, I think that was coming from, okay, they did Harry Potter, we have to do something else, and they came with this. And then, of course, they had Galaxy Edge, and I mean, we know that was a major hit for them, obviously, with all the Star Wars fans and everything. So that's, they changed the way a theme park experience is. So for me, Galaxy Edge now, it's where theme parks are heading. And I would love to see that into Universal even more, even in the Harry Potter land and all that. So I'm just excited about it. As a fan of theme parks, of just somebody who enjoys both theme parks, I see the good and the bad in both, and I appreciate everything that they do, because I'm like, okay, you're giving me something more. And I'm trying to to take advantage of whatever they're throwing my way, obviously. But I'm excited to see what the future brings. And I know it's probably going to be a very different future that what we thought was going to be just a couple of months ago. Things are going to change, and are going to change in a way that we can't even imagine right now. So we're going to see what they bring. But, I felt like Universal and Islands of Adventure was one of my first loves when I came to Orlando, and it still holds a very nice spot in my heart. So I'm excited to go back whenever they'll reopen.
One of the things that I like most about the Disneyland Resort is that once you're there, you can walk everywhere. You can walk between the two parks if you wanted. You can walk to downtown Disney. So once you park, or even if you stay at one of the hotels in the nearby area, you can just walk there and get there. And one of my favorite things is that sometimes I've stayed on property at Disneyland. Other times I've stayed at one of the hotels out there on Harbor Boulevard. And I like it that in the middle of the day, I could leave the park and be back at my hotel, whether it's a Disney one or whether it's an outside one, in 10 minutes. And maybe, just take a break, have a drink, relax, and then go back in for the nighttime. At Walt Disney World, that's very, very hard to do because everything is spread out. It's such a large place. There's no way to walk from your hotel to the park. Even if you stay on one of the monorail resorts, you can't do it. Like, you're most times having to wait for a bus or wait for a monorail. Some people even take Ubers now just to try to beat the crowds when it's really crowded, everybody leaving at once. Lots happening there. So that's really frustrating. One of the things that I've enjoyed, though, is that when I stay at Universal Orlando, it reminds me very, very much of Disneyland, because you can walk from park to park. At Wizarding World of Harry Potter, it's fantastic. You've got an attraction that brings you from park to park. That's amazing to me. But you can, if you wanted to, if you were inside a park and wanted to go eat at one of the really cool restaurants at City Walk, it's real easy to do. You don't have to get in some type of transportation device to do it or burn a big part of your day. Sometimes at Walt Disney World, waiting for a bus and the whole bus process, might take 45 minutes to an hour on really peak busy days. But at Universal, it's at your own pace. You can get there as fast or as slow as you wanted. So I really like that. And plus, I also like how one of my favorite things recently about visiting the resort are the water taxis. I love that. That's like one of the coolest. It's like a ride in itself because they've made it kind of like a beautiful journey from your hotel to the park or back and forth. Last time I was there, we were staying at Royal Pacific, but I actually took the water taxis down to Hard Rock and to Portofino Bay just to see it. I wanted to see what those look like. And we got out and had drinks at their bars and stuff and kind of made that into an evening. So that's one of the things I really like about it. It's just, there's an ease to it. And the fact that you can walk everywhere and kind of explore things as fast or as slow as you want. Whereas at Walt Disney World, you've really got to factor in the buses and the monorails and even taxis or Ubers. Yeah. And that's what's great. And at City Walk, it's kind of a change of pace too. You can leave the park for a little bit and have a little downtime, do a little shopping out there, walk around, then head back in. So that's what I've always liked about that, how they have it set up. I think at Walt Disney World, people kind of like the magic bands because it's an accessory. You can get all the different colors, and then Disney, had the ingenious idea of, selling different, even limited edition ones with different prints on it and stuff like that. I kind of like that idea, and that's what gets you into the ride at some places. You've got those really cool touch points where the Mickey head lights up, and that's kind of neat. Honestly, I kind of miss that a little bit at Universal. I think it's kind of cool. Like it's a neat thing, and I wouldn't mind if Universal did something like that. They sort of do it a little bit with your room keys, where you can charge everything to your room, just by showing the room key. I think that's neat, but it'd be kind of cool to have a little something that you either wore on your wrist or had around your neck or something like that. I wonder if that would be kind of cool. And I don't know what about the way Disney does it appeals to me, because I'm not really somebody who wants like a fashionable wristband or something, but I like the idea that the whole experience can be right there, and you just tap it and keep going. You don't have to keep reaching for your wallet. Like, I wonder if Universal would ever do anything, using people's cell phones or something like that. I think parks are slowly starting to do that type of thing, where you can just hold up your phone and use Bluetooth for that. But I wouldn't mind seeing Universal do something like that. I don't think at this point it's 100% necessary, but as the park grows, as the resort grows, as Epic Universe comes online, and there's more and more places to eat, more and more things to do, I think that might be a positive thing for them.
I think it's a break from Disney, because I feel like I think it ties into the fact that it just caters to two completely different groups of people. And I think it's a real breath of fresh air from just the kind of all-encompassing Disney. It's like all engulfing just Disney. You're submerged in Disney, but it's like a breath of fresh air. So I feel like it caters to two completely different types of people. And like I said in an earlier answer, if we were going to Florida with Aaron, we would choose Walt Disney World. But if we were going without Aaron, we would definitely choose. It would be almost the reverse. If we were going with Aaron, we would choose Walt Disney World for our main vacation and tack on a few days. But if we were going without Aaron, we would go to Universal Orlando and then tack on a few days of Walt Disney World. It's a hard question for me because we're so engulfed in the theme park world that we know all the ins and outs. We know everything you do over here and we know everything you do over there. But for the more, not to be harsh, but for the more naive theme park goer, it might be a little bit jarring to go from one to the other. And I think that's part of the responsibility of the parks to really make it clear and to explain their system. And I don't think that's something that Walt Disney World or Disneyland does very well, is explain their system. They just assume people will figure it out on their own and do the research, which isn't the case a lot. So once again, tying back into something else that I said, I think that the ease of the Express Pass and just kind of the more simplistic way that Universal Orlando runs their parks would be a breath of fresh air to the average theme park goer.
I think if we're talking about the crowd that books a room at the All-Star and wants a view of the castle, I don't think there's any amount of educating we're going to do that's going to explain some of these differences. And that's a thing. I'm not kidding. That's a thing. I want to stay at the All-Stars. What room do I request to get a view of the castle? But I think at this point, especially because of the web, the internet, I think the majority of guests are educated to enough to the point where they know now that they're two different entities. And what I hear now, that Disney fans have, more so than in the past, embraced the idea of Universal. It is the ease of it all. You don't have to change buses 6 times to get somewhere. It is very accessible in that it's more compact a space. You're not often dealing with the same level of crowds that you will see at most of the Disney theme parks. Not that Universal parks don't get crowded, but Magic Kingdom is still, all 4 Disney theme parks are still the top 4 theme parks in terms of attendance in the world. So Universal is usually a little further down on the list. So if you want the ease and convenience of not having to plan 6 months out, if you want the ease and convenience of being able to get around fairly quickly without a lot of drama, if you're looking for lower crowds and generally smaller lines, you can still go to Universal on off season. There's still an off season for Universal. There's no off season for Disney. I remember back in the days when you could, in January, you could fire a cannon down the middle of Main Street and not hit anybody. That's not the case anymore. It's always packed. Universal still has their seasons, and it's not, you can go, there are times you can go to Universal and the weather's great, like January. Weather's great, crowds aren't crazy. We talk about the how awesome it is to have Express Pass when either you buy it in the park or you get it through your hotel room. But there are times of the year where you don't need it, where the wait time for attractions is 10 or 15 minutes. That's very appealing. So I think Disney fans, that's part of what is attracting more Disney fans to Universal, is that, we still want our Disney experience. But more and more people are like, oh my God, it's so crowded. And, the line for this ride is 3.5 hours. And I wish I was joking, but I'm not. I mean, there are attractions at Disney World where the line routinely can be 3 hours long if you don't have a fast pass, and fast passes for them are almost impossible to get. I recommend, if you're going to split stay Disney and Universal, do Universal last. Do Disney first. A more relaxing experience if you're looking to decompress. Yeah, so I think those are some of the things that work in Universal's favor, in addition to adding the Harry Potter IP into those parks. Made it a lot. I remember when that got announced, people who swore they would never step foot on Universal property were all of a sudden saying, okay, well, maybe I'll check it out. And it's really worked in their favor. But because I've done it where, we've been doing something at Disney and then for a few days, and then we switch over and we're doing something at Universal. I've never thought, oh, I wish I had my Magic Band. I'm not a huge fan of the whole My Disney Experience thing. It's a technology that doesn't always work great. I think they should go back to the old FastPass system personally, but I think Universal's Express system works brilliantly for what it is. And Disney could never implement that. It's just too many resorts, too many people. They could never implement that in a reasonable way. So no, I don't know that people miss any of that stuff. Or at least it's not something I've heard and not something I've ever experienced.
I think that it really kind of depends on the person, to be perfectly honest. Some people very much enjoy, the Disney mentality of things, and some people are not so happy about it. I look at my own family, in my own family, my dad is very much the kind who enjoys a Universal style vacation over a Disney style vacation, whereas my mom kind of enjoys both. And then, the rest of the family kind of enjoys both. But I feel like, both, there's not a wrong way of enjoying, a vacation in Orlando. So I don't think that I don't think it can turn people off necessarily. I think it just depends on the kind of person that you are. Yes, for some people, it will definitely be a bit of a shock in a way, because it is so very different than Walt Disney World vacation. Visiting Universal is definitely a different experience overall. But I don't think either is bad. It just kind of depends on the kind of person that you are, I feel like.
I think it depends. I think it really depends. Again, like we said before, the experience of sometimes it's easy with Disney because even if you didn't get the things you wanted, you have reservations for something. And if you're not staying on property at Universal and have Express, sometimes that's a pain too. So I don't know. I think the thing we miss as fans and as people who go regularly, like even beyond us, there is certainly a subset of people that wherever they travel, they meticulously plan, or they at least do a base amount of research so they know what they're getting into when they go to, I'm talking about like when they go anywhere. Like if they go to Seattle, Washington, they at least know what's in Seattle, Washington before they show up. There is a giant amount of people in this world who show up in Orlando and have no idea, other than that there's a park with a castle. They have no idea what anything is. They don't know where Harry Potter is. They don't know that Disney has more than one park. They have no idea. They show up and they're like amazed that there's 3 other parks. They're like, I just thought there was the one with the castle. I didn't know there was other things. And then obviously those people are also going to be shocked that there are other theme parks in Orlando not operated by the Walt Disney Company. And then on the more knowledgeable side, I think there's people who just think like whatever they thought of Universal before, the new thing is, oh, well, they also have all that Harry Potter stuff. So I don't really like Harry Potter, though, so I still don't feel the need to go there. And I think that's been Universal's problem is I think most anything they've done that wasn't Harry Potter just doesn't get a lot of press or notoriety, sometimes deservedly, like Fast and the Furious, where you took what is one of your only franchise that you own, that you make 800 movies and they still make tons of money. So obviously people love your franchise, but you made a ride that so few people like that it didn't have any impact. When if you had built something of quality for Fast and the Furious, I think you would have something that some people in the outside world would be knowledgeable of and maybe even buy a ticket to see, because it's a franchise that people know and understand and like. So I just think we are so in the bubble that we lose sight of the fact that there are people that show up to both with very little understanding. And I think the percentage of people who go to Disney with a very good understanding but then don't understand how Universal works is very low. I think if you are doing that base amount of research for your Walt Disney World vacation, you probably do that for anywhere you go. So I think the same people who show up and don't know what a Magic Band is are the same people who don't know what's in Universal before they enter. I think if they have Express Pass because they're staying on property, they'll be fine. They may even like it more. But I think if they're not, I think without Express, it gets hard to do some of that stuff. Like some of those attractions, like Gringotts still gets a hell of a line sometimes. I've never seen a short wait at Reign of Kong, like ever. I feel like every time I go, that wait is insane. So I think, and you don't have options there. It's not like Disney where the Fast Pass is free. So if you open the app, like while all the good stuff is gone, there's not even like second tier stuff they can send you to with no wait, which I think is a thing people like at Disney. People like the fact that like, oh, it rained, we're not really going to go do Animal Kingdom, but why don't we just change all our Fast Passes to Epcot for tonight? And I think you could still like salvage a day. Like there's often enough available where you may not get to do Test Track, but you probably got to do Soarin' and like 2 other things with no wait, and you probably feel pretty good about it. I think Universal not having a free system turns some people off. I think because there's no comparison there. Because Disney, it's a completely free system, and Universal, it's a paid-only system, whether it's through a resort reservation or you decide to buy it.
So as the competition between Walt Disney World and Universal Orlando continues, it will be very interesting to see what happens post-COVID-19. We cannot ignore the fact that the parks are in a very different place right now, and who knows what they will look like in a year's time. But in many ways, Universal still struggles to know how to compete at the top level with Disney. But also, in many other ways, we feel they exceed the mouse. So finally, I asked my guests to compare the 2 resorts and tell me what they feel Universal Orlando needs to do in the future to up their game and offer Disney World some serious competition.
I think the parks need a little bit of zhuzhing up. I said that before. Like it needs a little bit of being refreshed a little bit. Some of the areas I can tell that it's like, okay, you need some love. It needs to be refreshed a little bit, like a little bit of a facelift. And it's something that Epcot needed to do, and they're starting to do it at Epcot because it was very dated, the park. So I think that will set Universal apart from Disney even more. But I think there are really good things in both parks and things that need improvement in both parks. I have to say one thing that Universal, in my book, wins hands down compared to Disney. It's how you enter the parks, because they have metal detectors, and I'm like, it takes a second to go through it, and I'm like, why on earth at Disney we still have to go through, and they have to open the bag, and we have to stand in line, and they don't really open every single zipper that it's in there. So I still don't understand why Disney doesn't have like the metal detectors like Universal does, because it takes a second. So that Universal wins in my book just for that. But I think, again, personally, I think it's more like just some improvement overall in the parks. So just a little bit, just to refresh the parks, includes new things if you can, update some of the buildings, and just giving a little bit of love to those. But there's still so many things that they attract me even more at Universal than Disney. I'm a huge Jurassic Park fan. And when I say Jurassic Park, it's the original one, because there's only one for me in my book. It's one of those movies that if it's on TV 3 days in a row, I will watch it 3 days in a row. I dragged my boyfriend to watch 25 years or something, when they put it back in the movie theater. So I was there and I went to the movie theater again. And I love that era, and I still love the ride. And even though I scream like bloody murder every time there's that drop, but I do it. So there are still a lot of things at Universal. I think they're a lot of fun. I just want to see a little bit of improvement overall in the park, or just taking care of the park a little bit, just a little bit of improvement. But other than that, I think they're doing great, and I love that they're different, and I love that it's its own identity, and they still have me as a fan. So
I think both resorts are fantastic, and both have their positives and both have negatives, but if somebody was lucky enough to visit both on an Orlando vacation, they're going to have a great time, because, Walt Disney World for so long has just been a part of the consciousness, not only of Americans, but of people worldwide. And like I said at the beginning, it all goes back to Disneyland, and that just got into people's consciousness, and to have one on the West Coast and also a version of it on the East Coast is great. So no matter where you are in the country or the world, you can get to it, fairly easily. So that's great. I like Universal though too, because it's fun to be alive at a time where you can see the park growing. I mean, none of us got to be there. I mean, some of us did, of course, but to see Disneyland grow and to what it's become today, and then Walt Disney World. But it's fun to watch Universal Studios grow from that park that I visited when I was in high school back in 1991, and just see it, just continue to evolve and grow and become something, gigantic, and to be a major player. Not only on the East Coast, but also on the West Coast too, with Universal Studios Hollywood, like that, of course, being a real working studio out there, but a lot of the same great attractions that are in Florida are also there. I think for Universal to continue to compete, they have to continue to innovate with their ride systems, which they've been doing. I mean, it's always funny. I always like looking at social media and watching the debates about what is the best ride in Orlando currently. And it's gone back and forth for years and years. Like for the longest times, it was the Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man at Islands of Adventure. And then you would hear about the Indiana Jones Adventure, that being a big one. Now we're talking about Rise of the Resistance at Hollywood Studios. I like it going back and forth. And then you hear what's coming up on the horizon. It's fun to see the patents that Universal is filing, and Disney as well. And then you start to wonder, what are they going to do with Epic Universe? Is that kind of the next generation? Like, I remember I was talking about going to Islands of Adventure in 1999 and seeing all of those new technologies, and they had never been used in a theme park that way before. Is the same thing going to happen with Epic Universe? Are they developing things right now and getting ready to implement them that we have no idea about? Are they going to blow us away when that park opens? Even though it's going to be delayed a little bit, maybe that delay is a blessing in disguise that the technologies develop even further. Who knows? That's what I think. But I think Universal and their creative department has the right idea of basically taking storytelling, but blending it with the latest technologies to kind of blow people's mind.
I feel like it's so hard to compare them because they're just two different beasts. Like Walt Disney World, it's hard to compare Walt Disney World to anything really, but I would say just trying, it's like Walt Disney World, it's like it literally is its own world. Like you go there and you're fully encompassed, and the outside world doesn't exist anymore. It's like you're just in it, from the resort you're staying in to your transportation, everything, you're in it. And I feel like if Universal wants to try to compete with that they need to kind of just make it more of a submersion into Universal, so and I think that their new park, I feel like that will help this also, just make it feel more like not something that you can just do over a weekend, it needs to feel more like something that you need to take your time and, do over, even over the span of a week, make it your whole trip. And I feel like that's what Universal needs to do if they want to try to compete with Disney more. And I also feel like they need more things like what they did with Harry Potter, just like the full immersion, just hitting that nostalgia factor, with their IP that they're using. And I feel like they can do that with their new park. And I feel like that'll help a lot.
Well, first, they are a competitor to Disney. Make no mistake about it. The laughter that used to happen in Disney executive offices about Universal no longer takes place. Okay? Universal has shown themselves to be fierce competitors and real players in this game. You never underestimate anyone willing to spend the kind of money that Comcast is willing to spend on this. You never, ever make that mistake. Disney learned that with Harry Potter. They learned that because they thought, so what? Big deal. They were, after it opens, they were not saying that. Okay? I think what Universal needs to do is continue doing what they're doing. And if possible, do it more. Invest more. Put more into it. But I don't know if that, is financially feasible because look at what they're doing. Look at the parks they're building. Look at the expansions they're doing. So they're playing a long game. They're playing a long game. And I think, I want to see what the impact is. It's not every day a new theme park opens in this town. That'll be the next one, their third gate, Epic Universe, which, my God, Could they have come up with a worse name for a theme park? It's absolutely atrocious. But think about the last time Universal opened a theme park, really, Islands of Adventure. Think about where the company was at that point. It was struggling. It was still struggling. The service wasn't that great. The food certainly wasn't good. But, you know, a lot of people got exposed to Universal because of that, because of Islands of Adventure, and they found it wanting. That's not going to be the case when Epic Universe opens, because now you have a company that is firing on all cylinders. You've got incredible team. Their team members are well trained, invested, well taken care of. And when they open this new theme park, scores of people are going to be exposed to that. And that's the impression they're going to be left with. And that's why Universal has been cutting in to Disney's market share, because they've improved so much that people go and they experience it and they're like, hey, this is actually pretty good. And they want to come back. And then maybe they're cutting days off of their Disney trip and adding them on. You know, where it used to be, you know, Disney wanted to create that wall where once you got onto Disney property, you never left. That's the reason we have Magical Express. That's the reason they price their tickets. You know, you think, you know, a 4-day ticket may cost you $300-$400. That 5th day is only going to cost you another $20 or $30, right? Why is that? Because you're going to be at Disney and you're going to be saying, okay, well, if I add another day, it's only $30 here. But if I go up to Universal, it's going to cost me $100. So I'm just going to stay here. Disney was brilliant with that. That's exactly why it's set up that way, to keep people from going to Universal. But as Universal is up their game, that strategy has worked less and less. And you have people now, because of the quality of the IP, the quality of the experience, you have people that are willing to spend the money and go to Universal, where it would be cheaper for them to spend those days on their tickets at Walt Disney World. Believe me, the hotels at Universal, in terms of at least the 3 big ones, are not cheaper than Disney. Now, when you start getting into Cabana Bay and places like that, they are very reasonable in their price points. But you're not getting Express Pass with that. You're not getting Express Pass with that. To get that perk, you got to spend the money, and oftentimes, Royal Pacific, Hard Rock, or Portofino is going to be as expensive, if not more so, than staying at a deluxe Disney resort. So they just, in my opinion, they just need to keep doing what they're doing. And when Epic Universe opens, I think, again, the way Harry Potter, or in particular Diagon Alley, I think, because that's when Comcast was kind of established, and the service level had gone up and had become much, much better. So you had a lot of people going to see that and saying, wow, this is actually really nice. And we started seeing more split stays, more people talking about split stays, and even more people talking about, hey, I think I'm going to skip Disney this year and go to Universal. That's not prevalent, but just the fact that we're hearing it over the last couple of years at all tells me Universal's doing something right. And I think the next game changer, they've already shown they're very, very, very good at building theme parks and building attractions, and they can meet Disney Imagineering head on. So I think once Epic Universe opens, I think they're going to be in a huge position to get market share away from Disney. And again, based on what happens with COVID-19, I don't know how much or how willing Disney's going to be to respond to that. It depends, right now, in this circumstance that we're in right now, Disney is losing $30 million a day. Their all production on films is shut down. All production on TV shows are shut down. There are no sports events happening for ESPN to capitalize on. Every single Disney theme park and cruise ship in the world is not operating right now. There is very little. The only bright shining thing they have in their portfolio right now really is Disney Plus. Like I said, Universal not in the same position. Their movie studios may be hurt and their television shows may be hurt, but Comcast makes most of its money from cable. And that certainly isn't hurting anybody right now. That's not hurting at all. So I think you may see a perfect storm happen for Comcast in that they'll be in a much better financial position to move forward with Epic Universe, where Disney's going to have to scale back. We know for a fact Disney's going to be scaling back on a number of construction projects. Anything that hasn't already begun is not going to happen. So a lot of the things they've announced are going to get pulled. But I think Universal may be in a better financial position to move forward. And you combine those two things, Disney not able or willing to respond, and Universal able to finance the things they need to do to grow and expand their parks, could create a perfect storm, and who knows what happens then. So I don't think it's fair to say that Universal will never compete on the level that Disney does. I don't think we can say that right now. I think that it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot of money and a lot of luck. But I think they are fierce competitors, and I think they're well run. And like I said, from the standpoint of somebody who's been following this now for 23 years, while I hate the situation we're in as a country, as for the world, dealing with a pandemic, the part of me that follows the business side of this is absolutely fascinated by what's going on. And can't wait to see how these companies respond. So we'll find out.
Well, I'll answer the last part first. I think, again, they need to maybe look at gearing more towards, families with smaller children. I think that that's number one in what they need to do to up their game. I think that, and I hate to say this because I do love Universal, I think they are trying so very hard to be in that first tier. I just think that Disney is always going to be that first tier. They're always going to be what people think of first, when they're planning their Orlando vacation. It's just the nature of how things have been, because Disney has been around since 1971 in Orlando. That's, in Universal, the 1990s, there's such a gap there that people are always going to think of Disney as number one and then Universal as number two. And I don't know that Universal can do anything to fix that. It's just kind of the spot they're stuck in because they were second, because they weren't around since the 70s, because they don't have that nostalgia factor. People weren't always thinking, hey, I'm going to plan that Universal trip. They always think, I'm going to plan that Disney trip. And because people think that Disney and Universal are the same thing, they think Universal is part of that. So, that's part of the problem is Disney has become so ingrained in people and their mentality of what Orlando is. I don't know that Universal can ever be on the same footing as Disney is. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, I don't think that they can ever become that. They're always going to be their own entity. They're always going to be their own thing. And I think that works well for them. I appreciate what they do as a park. I appreciate what Disney does as a park. They are two very separate things that people don't realize are two very separate things. So, which, how many people think that the Wizarding World of Harry Potter is in Disney, in Walt Disney World? You get so many people who ask cast members at Disney, where's the Harry Potter theme park? And they have to go, it's not here. It's at Universal. It's at another park. And then they, think, okay, well, can I use my park hopper ticket to go there? Well, no, you can't use your Disney ticket to go to Universal. You have to buy another ticket to get there. So they're both meshed and ingrained in each other in a weird way. And I think, unfortunately, Universal is always going to be number two because of that. Just plain and simple. I don't think that there's anything Universal can do, even with a third park, even with all the resorts that they build, with everything, because Disney is so ingrained in America as Orlando. It's just not going to happen.
I think to compete, they have to continue to do things at a consistent quality. And I think that's been their biggest challenge over the last 10 years. I think they have done some things that absolutely have challenged the status quo, whether it was the first Potterland or Diagon or Hagrid's. But if you notice in all those things I mentioned, they're all based on one franchise. So I think people would like to see that amount of quality and money go into things that aren't Harry Potter. And I think that's why people are excited about Nintendo, because it's another company that would hold them accountable in the same way Rowling did for that quality. I think the Nintendo Land could be absolutely fantastic. The Mario Kart ride could be really wonderful. I think we get afraid for the other lands in that park where Universal is completely in charge and may not put the money there. But if they did everything at the quality of Hagrid's, which the only negative thing I could say about Hagrid's, other than it doesn't work, but they'll figure it out, is the animatronics. But I mean, they've always had problems building amazing animatronics. But if you could build things that fun and that well received on a consistent basis, like, then you can really compete. So if they build an entire new park at that quality, then there's some serious competition. Absolutely. I think if you build a park that the entire world is talking about, and I'm not saying the results are going to be immediate, because they're not, but if you build something of that quality, word of mouth over time will be strong. A Disney example would be Tokyo Disney Sea. You built likely what is the best theme park in the world. And it's taken 15 to 20 years for the world to, in total, understand that. But now we're at the point where 10% of all tourists to the country of Japan go to the Tokyo Disney Resort. 10% of all people that visit a country, not a state or a prefecture or whatever you want to say, a region, but 10% of all people who visit the country go there because of that word of mouth that is built over 10, 15, 20 years. So you're not going to open a new park at that quality level and immediately be at the same level as Disney. But if you keep up with that quality and the word of mouth continues to build over so many years, you will see those attendance numbers. I mean, Tokyo's numbers are almost beating Florida at this point, pre-pandemic, obviously, but they were on pace to top the Orlando parks. So I think that speaks for quality. Walt Disney said quality will out, and that's true for any business. That is not exclusive to Disney. It's true of this industry in total. If you continue to do work at the highest level you can, and Universal's proven sometimes when they want to, they can do it. You can certainly compete, and maybe even 30 years from now, anything could happen. They could be at the same attendance level, but you'd have to outspend Disney. You've got to top them. And I don't know if consistently Universal Creative is convinced they want to do that. I don't know if they're consistently convinced that every big attraction they build needs the budget of Hagrid or Forbidden Journey. I think that's a mistake, because I think if you want to make more money and you want to compete, I think that's the way to go.
Well, everyone, that is going to bring this 3-part podcast documentary to an end. I hope you've enjoyed listening to it just as much as I enjoyed putting it together. So I suppose I need to wrap this thing up now, taking everyone's viewpoints into consideration. It's made me open my eyes a little bit to Universal Orlando and look at it from a different perspective. As someone who's been podcasting about it for 9 years, it's difficult to be unbiased sometimes, especially as I am much more of a Universal fan than I am a Disney fan. That doesn't mean I don't want to go to Disney. That doesn't mean I'm not going to enjoy it. But Universal speaks to me much more as a person. So speaking to my guests, I've come to the conclusion that both resorts have a symbiotic relationship and that they need each other to succeed. I've always looked at them as very separate resorts, but after working on this documentary, I've concluded that they work together to make an Orlando trip a much more varied and mixed vacation. And rather than choosing one or the other, I've kind of realised, choose both. Mix it up. The change of pace helps both resorts, and the fact that Universal Orlando is not trying to be Walt Disney World is a good thing. It allows them to stand on their own and be a different experience than a Disney World trip. But they still manage to maintain a very high standard of amenities, comfort, and overall guest experience that we've commented on the show so many times about. And it seems to be at a slightly cheaper price overall. Now, whether they'll capitalise on that by boosting ticket prices, or whether they'll be conscious of not trying to price themselves out of the market, that remains to be seen. The fact that there is competition between the two resorts keeps both of them on the toes and producing great attractions for us to experience. Now, we are the ones that benefit in the end, let's be honest. Without the Wizarding World of Harry Potter Hogsmeade, you don't get the world of Avatar at Animal Kingdom. Without Diagon Alley, you don't get Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Without Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, you don't get Epic Universe. So we are the ones that win as long as you're prepared to be open to both. Now, it appears that one of the main features of Universal Orlando, where they definitely excel over Disney, is in their hotels. And it seems that that's because of the Lowe's hotel chain partner. They've got a wealth of experience in the hotel industry, and I will agree, having stayed at 3 of the on-site hotels, they are fantastic. If you are staying at an Express Pass hotel, that is worth its weight in gold alone. But also, playing devil's advocate, if you're not driving, it makes it a better experience staying on-site at Universal. One of the things I disagree with that Universal do at their on-site hotels is charge for parking. And it's one of the things that's really put me off staying there on previous trips with the kids, because we've always had a car and that parking fee can rack up. But if you've Ubered or taxied and are just staying at the Universal Orlando Resort without a car, like we did for the Weekender in October last year, then they're a fantastic and reasonably priced hotel with great amenities. And let's be honest, the staff are top-notch. I cannot say that enough. Every staff member that we have come across whilst visiting a Universal Orlando hotel have been amazing. So now, looking forward, Universal seem to be embracing their more adult theme park experience. You know, you only have to look at the Jurassic Park coaster being built in Islands of Adventure right now to know that they don't appear to be looking at the rounded family experience. Now, whether that changes with Epic Universe remains to be seen. I think it will, but I still don't think it will be a family park. But of course, we don't know, and we can't wait to see how it pans out. And of course, visit when it opens, whether that be 2023 or 2024 at this point. But we'll be there. Now, as far as history, they may not have the built-in nostalgia that Walt Disney World has, but the major properties they have and will be adding to their parks in the future will bring a different kind of nostalgia, I've figured out. You know, with the introduction of the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, they capitalised on a fan base that grew up with those books and movies. Those people, who are now adults, are passing it down to their kids, and I believe the Harry Potter franchise will be like a Lord of the Rings. It will be an evergreen franchise that people will be passing down from generation to generation for those kids to read those books. And then looking forward to the addition of Super Nintendo World at many of its parks, and especially at Epic Universe, I think that will bring an even different level of nostalgia for the adults that grew up playing Super Mario and Donkey Kong. But again, it still seems to be aiming more at the adults of yesteryear that grew up with Nintendo rather than the kids that are playing Nintendo now. But that doesn't mean the kids aren't going to enjoy it. So overall, Universal appear to be heading in the right direction. They are doing some amazing things. And it seems like they've learned from the mistakes they've made over the past 5 years by putting too many screen-based attractions in, and it looks like they're stepping away from that. And that's good, because they're learning. They are still learning. They do not have the wealth of experience that the Disney company has in Orlando. And Universal Orlando Resort has become a must-visit location in Orlando for many people now, as we know from doing the podcast. A lot of our listeners are Universal fans over Disney fans. It's Universal first, then Disney. So, really, what we need to do, and we're excited to see it, is to see what the next 10 years bring, especially coming out of COVID-19. Can Universal use this to their advantage, to step above Disney? Or will they always be in Disney's shadow? It's going to be interesting to see. But suffice it to say, we will be here, we will be reporting about it, we will continue on, and as I said previously, the only ones that win are us. We get to ride fantastic experiences in some of the IPs that we love. Who doesn't want that? The only thing that doesn't love that is my wallet. So anyway, wrapping up, I think both resorts need to be there for each other. The competition is good, and exciting times are ahead. So thank you everyone for listening. That's going to wrap up our look at Universal Orlando from a Walt Disney World fan's point of view. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed putting this together. I have reached out and connected with people who I've never spoken to before, and it's been awesome. So speaking of those people, I want to say a huge thank you to all 6 of them for taking the time to come and speak to me. And again, I want to encourage you all to go and check them out. So My guests were Maria Riboli, who of course was the former host of the Unleash the Magic podcast, which unfortunately is not around anymore, and it's such a shame. She can be found on Instagram at Maria Riboli Photography. CoasterRadio.com. Go and check Mike out at Coaster Radio. 15 years they've been podcasting, the original theme park podcast. Those guys are a lot of fun. Nikki Montoya, our good buddies over at the Theme Park Duo podcast. Go and check Gabe and Nikki out. They are like the US version of Tracy and myself. Of course, one of the granddads of Disney podcasts, Pete Werner at the Diz Unplugged podcast. Ricky Niblett, who's someone I never spoke to before, but Ricky was awesome. Go and check her out at the Be Our Guest podcast. They put 3 podcasts out a week. And then finally, the enigma that is Tom Corliss. You can go and listen to him on the WDWNT podcast, and they have a lot of stuff going on. And again, all 5 of those podcasts can be found wherever you listen to the unofficial Universal Orlando podcast. Go and check them out. Let them know what you thought of their appearance on the show. I'm sure they'd appreciate hearing that you enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed this different look at Universal Orlando. And as Universal Orlando fans, I hope, like it has for me, it's made you look at the resort just a little bit differently. So that's going to wrap up this 3-part podcast documentary. So for Maria, Mike, Nikki, Pete, Ricky and Tom, I have been Lee. This has been the unofficial Universal Orlando podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Guess that wraps things up for another unofficial Universal Orlando podcast. You guys did all right. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Pinterest, keyword UUO Podcast. Listen and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or anywhere podcasts are found. You can find our blog at uuopodcast.com. Send us your spews, which Lou gets your poo recordings, questions, or comments to podcast@uuopodcast.com. Check out our friends the Theme Park Duo and our awesome sponsors Mouse and Muggle Travel Company. So, until next time, don't give up your day job, say cheese, and see you later.